Here's the machine shop where they're doing, if you can't really see, I got other pictures, but these guys are making miniatures of everything. All the little craft, the little modules. Here's like a, they call it a projection sphere. They had this big ball. Now this is like a track for some reason next to this curved screen. And again, it doesn't even make any sense that you would think, oh, that's because they're, and then they've got these guys painting it in painstaking detail, right? They're painting exact replica. And here's the track coming around here. So you could basically put a cart with a camera on it and emulate the orbit of these crafts on the moon. Why else would you do that? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Look, I gotta tell you, we've got a bioweapon masquerading as a vaccine. We've got a puppet pretend president and a banking system that's literally on the verge of collapse. If you're like me at all, sometimes you could just use a break. So today we're doing just that, and we're talking about Woo, the NASA 1 hour lies, disappointments, and comedy hour with my friends Grosen and Jeran from Jeranism. Before we start this one, just a quick word about our sponsor. With spring around the corner, it's a good time to stock up on C60 Evo's breakthrough anti-aging products. Treat yourself, your skin, mental focus, and deeper sleep to C60 Evo organic edible oils, skin serums, and hair renewal. Using Nobel Prize-winning science, their lab manufactures and delivers pure C60 ESS60, the cleanest and most potent C60 products you'll find anywhere. In lab tests, the rats that got this incredible molecule lived 90% longer than rats that didn't. Healthy food, clean water, exercise, and C60 Evo are your best defense for radiant health and longevity. Everyone benefits from C60 Evo. Enjoy 15 to 20% off on monthly subscriptions and collection sets, and you can use my personal code SGTR for 10% off at checkout. I've tried the products myself, and I really do love them. Feeling is believing, and they've got you covered. That's C60 Evo. I'll leave a link below. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors, thanks so much for tuning in. It's Sean from SGT Report, thephaser.com, and of course, thelibertymill.com. Join us as we discuss more Woo. My friend Grosen and Jeran from Jeranism are on the line. Welcome to the 1 hour NASA Comedy Lies and Disappointments Hour, friends. First, I'll welcome my guests. Jeran, welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much. It's awesome to be here.
Pleasure to have you, my friend. And you've just met my other friend, Grosen, who, let's just say Grosen does some really helpful things for SGT Report behind the scenes. He's a real brainiac. That is for sure. Grosen, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be on.
Thanks for coming on, my friend. I love that lunar lander just over your left shoulder. Now,
yeah,
let's just talk a little bit about that. In fact, let me just do a screen share here, guys. When I go to YouTube now and I type in NASA lunar lander, well, you know what I get? I get a lot of the propaganda about the new Artemis lunar lander. Perhaps we'll talk about that. But Jeran, you do a great job with your weekly NASA comedy hour over on your site there on YouTube, Jeranism. People should subscribe. Tell us about that. How do you come up with an hour per week? You just watching NASA videos and tearing them apart, or what?
Yeah, and it's actually usually a lot longer than an hour. But there's so much hilarity, and you notice that the newer stuff is getting harder and harder to tell that it's fake, right? I mean, we're getting to the point now where the CGI graphics are basically, real life. They look as good as real life. But if you go back to the 70s, 80s, Space Lab, and that kind of stuff, the fakery is obvious. And so it's easy to go back and watch some of these old films, these old spacewalks, and just to make fun of them. I mean, what NASA does is a joke. I was just looking at all these movie posters. Have you ever seen all the movie posters that they put out for their astronauts? It's just sad that our tax money is going to this. I'll show you a couple of them. Let me transfer this over here, and you'll see here. Let me show you. So these are all just movie posters. I'm going to move over there, and you'll see them where they take any of these little missions that they do, and they have to go out and they make these movies, and they make it look like, here's one that looks like Armageddon. And it's just hilarious to me. There's this much money going into this kind of, I don't know, glorifying these guys. Look at this one. It's all like these old movies, right? They've got some Beatles stuff. It's just, and there's so many. Want to see the Matrix one? Is this one here? So they just have these. Look at, I mean, they have to go buy all this stuff.
Are these NASA produced?
Yeah. Well, these are all missions. So this is Expedition 16. So it's just funny to me that they do all these stuff. Here's this one. So, I mean, there's probably 50 or 60 of these. So every mission that they have, they dress up in some. Here's one that's like, what is this from? Bad News Bears or something? Maybe A League of Their Own. Not really sure who that's supposed to be emulating. But it's just funny to me that it's just an actors guild, basically. I think of NASA as a jobs program. One of the things people don't realize, let me take that off there now. There's 1,000 of those. But one of the things people don't realize is put my camera back on. So if I were to tell you that, what do you think is a bigger industry? And I went to
end your screen share.
Sorry.
There you go.
So what is a bigger industry, when it comes to Hollywood, all of Hollywood? So let's talk about the movie industry. We're talking home entertainment. We're talking Blu-rays, DVDs, streaming, all that stuff. Or music, which includes all of, the Grammys, everything's streaming sales. And then you add to that video games. So we say all of apps, PlayStation, Xbox, all these kind of console games, or the space industry. Which one do you think is the biggest out of those four?
Well, I can guess now because of the way you're setting up that question. Give us the answer.
Well, it's actually even worse than you think. Space is bigger than all of Hollywood, all of music, all of video games combined. So people fail to realize, they always give you this question of why would they fake it? What is in it for them? Well, it is a huge, I think that the space industry is at 450 billion right now.
Annually.
Annually.
Can I say something about that? Pfizer,
sure.
$100 billion business. The NFL, a $20 billion business. So when Damar Hamlin dropped dead on the field, you can imagine what was going on behind the scenes for those 9 minutes as Pfizer was on the line, probably with the commissioner of the NFL and probably with some national security people on the federal level, because that was a national security incident, because the bioweapon masquerading as a vaccine is killing people. I just want to make the point. Pfizer, a $100 billion a year business, 5 times bigger than the NFL. And you're saying that the space industry is 5 times bigger than Pfizer?
450, yeah, 450 a year. So, again, this just kind of helps answer that question. And then you really look at it, and this is why it can't go away, is it would crash the economy of the United States, number one, because of all the offshoots. And what NASA always gets away with saying is they say, oh, but we don't spend the money in space, we spend the money here. And again, when nobody's disputing that all the money that they spend to build a rocket or goes right back into the system. But that's kind of what keeps an economy moving, right? So it's basically a jobs program. And I forgot what the total number of employees they have. I think it's 40,000, but that doesn't count any of these offshoots or these skunk works or these kind of JPL offshoots, things like that. So it's a huge industry that isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. And we're just trying to point people that, I wear this hat here. Well, it says Fake X, but on the back, I have these hats on sale at my store, shop.jeranism.com. But it says NASA going effing nowhere, because they go effing nowhere. They just don't go anywhere. They, fill you with dreams and fill you with aspirations. And they love to keep people thinking about the stars. But they've convinced people that we should be living on Mars with Elon. We have everything we need here on Earth. Think of how great the Earth is. Water, everything we need, food, the sun, everything's just here perfectly, the atmosphere. And they're talking about going to Mars where there is no atmosphere, where there is no water, where there is, it's like, okay, yeah. And people are convinced. People are like, I want to go to die on Mars with Elon.
Well, and you know what? Bill Gates, people are starting to wake up. They're trying to destroy our atmosphere with cloud seeding, and they want to paint out the sun, all in the name of climate change and saving the Earth from the boogeyman climate virus. I did mention to Austin when he was on just the other day that George Bush Jr. in 2006 talked about returning to the moon and getting men back on the moon no later than 2014. And he laughed. He said he had never heard that before. They just keep pushing the date back, as they will continue to push the date back pretty much forever, Jeran, because they can't get there, in my view. They can't land men on the moon, in my view.
No, I don't think so. I have a video, a documentary I did called NASA Going Nowhere Since 1958. And in it, I go through every president from Kennedy basically on, and showed how it's just a back and forth, kick the can down the road. If Obama says this, then Trump says this, and then Biden says it just goes back and forth. And you can just tell that it's, and then they can use that as an excuse, right? So if you ask somebody, why haven't we gone back to the moon? They'll say, oh, it's bureaucracy, politics. So they make it look like that. But really, it's just because they can't go. And we've heard Charlie Bolden say, even if you gave me every dollar in the U.S. budget, I couldn't get somebody to Mars. He doesn't think anybody will go to the moon in his lifetime. Now, again, do we trust him? He's an astronaut, former head of NASA, so probably not. But you were talking about the cloud seeding and stuff like that. Have you seen the NASA video where they make clouds?
Yes, I have.
Mm-hmm. So, again, what's sad about that is we hear about these, droughts in California, And I mean, if they really could do that, then they would be using it to help us, not hurt us.
Right. Grosen, let me ask you about the lunar lander there that you put together. Are you a space enthusiast, or why the lunar lander? And by the way, I've seen the model, or maybe they'd say it's the actual one, I don't know, at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. I would defy anybody to tell me that 3 burly, fully astronauted, dressed up men with oxygen packs on their backs could actually climb up that ladder, fit through that little hole, and sit in that thing for days at a time. 3 men sitting in that thing? Well, you answer the question about why the lunar lander behind you. I'll show some B-roll of the actual lunar lander, and I have to say, Grosen, yours looks way better than the real one.
It's the official Lego set, actually. And the reason why I bought it is simply because it's such a ridiculous piece of junk when you look at the pictures that NASA took of this. It looks like, sticks out of plastic with cardboard and tape on it. Yeah, like you just showed there, like some kind of a project that kids would do at school. And besides, you said about that 3 grown-up men would fit in this one. There were always only 2 astronauts or actonauts on the lunar surface, because the third one was in the service module that was orbiting the moon at all times.
Yeah, that's right.
What is funny is that I just heard recently that in the communication between the astronauts or actonauts on the moon and with NASA on the ground, etc., a ton of communication. However, the astronaut in the service module, he never said a peep. He's not included in any of the documentation about who said what and what time. So I guess he was not important during that mission, or they simply forgot to put it in the manuscript.
That actually brings up a really good point, and thanks for correcting me there. You're right. I always consider the lunar lander as this thing that all 3 men were aboard, but you're right. The science that they claim happened is very different than that. One man stayed behind and orbited the moon at 4,000 miles per hour or something, and we're to believe that with 1969, 1970 technology, they were able to Jeran, navigate the stars and use something a ship's captain in the 1700s would use to. How in the world, without modern day computers, could they possibly navigate and then join back up with the thing that was orbiting the moon? These questions can't be answered, can they?
They had to land on the moon, right, for the first time ever with people. It's not like they've had any practice. You can't practice the rover landing on Earth on a 1/6 gravity or something foreign body like that. And they had a schedule in the newspaper that said what time they'd be landing, what time they'd be getting out. So yeah, everybody in the world watch. Imagine if somebody would have died. Like the thought of it just not even. It would never happen that way. They would never telecast live the first landing of a craft on a foreign body like that, because you never know. Imagine what it would have done for the morale of the world if they just died. And they're like, oh, I guess we can't go to the moon. So again, it's just one of those things that once they've talked it up a bunch, they basically told people since the 50s, man will go to space, right? Man's going to go to the moon, and man's destiny is in the stars. Once you start saying that to people, if you would have realized at any point that you can't go, you wouldn't have been able to tell people. And then even stranger, it was 1961 or 62. I can't remember exactly when it was that Kennedy made his Rice speech, they call it, when he was at Rice, and he talked about, man, we'll go to the moon, we'll land a man, bring him back safely. Do you know that nobody had ever been to space yet from the United States? Yeah. So he claimed that we were going to, he made the prediction that by the end of the decade, we would go to the moon and return a man to Earth, but we'd never put a person in space yet.
Yeah, that happened later on when the first American astronaut was put in orbit and landed again.
Right. And then one other thing I like to point out, because you always get people saying, if they faked it, why wouldn't Russia, expose it? Well, Russia's doing the same. And so one of the examples of that is if you talk to somebody from Russia and you ask them what they learned in school about the space race, they'll tell you the stupid Americans went to the moon when Russia already knew there was no use in going there. So what they do is they tell 2 different stories. Russia tells the story as they were first in space. They were the first animal in space, first orbit, first woman in space, all those things. So they have all these accolades. The United States tells the story is that we were the first to get to the moon. So both of them use their position for prestige with their own constituents or their own citizens, whereas they both work together in the whole fakery of the whole thing. So it's easy for them to tell that story and then to say, oh, and we realized that the moon was just too expensive and there's nothing there. So they can tell the story that the stupid Americans spent money on going to the moon, and look what they got. They got nothing out of it, which is what the story that they do tell.
Yeah, and the manipulation done by the Russians would be exposed by the Americans if the Russians exposed the American and the other way around.
It would crash the whole thing. So, I mean, it's just there is answers to these questions that a lot of people just shoo away and basically say, oh, there's no way. But you talked about the rover. Have you talked about the rover driving on the moon?
Yeah. Oh, to me, that's the smoking gun of the entire lie, is that they say that the rover folded up neatly into the lunar lander. And believe it or not, once years ago, I did see, I guess, what they would call a blueprint of how that would work. But I don't see it with my own two eyes when I look at that lunar lander, how that would work. A full-size dune buggy with tires fully inflated. I mean, it makes zero sense. It makes less than 0 cents.
There's a meme out there that shows it's the lunar rover sitting next to a Jeep. And the Jeep frame, it says, costs like $900 or whatever. And then the lunar rover was $38 million. It's like, what part of that is $38 million? Where did you find money to do that? Or where did you find that we needed to do that? But let me show this real quick. I just want to show you this. Oops, now I lost where I was. Okay, I'll move it over here. So this is let me move it so you can see this video. This is a video of Apollo 16, them driving on can you see that whole thing? Good enough. So this is Apollo 16. But one thing I pointed out, and people are like, I've never even realized that, is if you watch this, these guys are going over these huge rocks, but their voice doesn't change at all. Their voice doesn't change. I think you'll be able to hear this. You hear that?
Okay.
Can you hear that or no?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So watch these rocks that they're going over. Huge boulders. Look at this. Again, listen to the guys' voices and think to yourself, if you've ever driven on a go-kart, which is basically what this thing's going to be, you're low to the ground. If you were running over, and they have metal tires, these are not inflated tires with shocks. These are metal tires on the moon. And again, watch the terrain that they're going over and listen to their voices. You would be able to tell if they were driving over huge rocks. Listen.
Climbing, but we've been climbing for quite a while here.
They're just mowing through this field of rocks.
It was tagged out a minute ago. Wow.
You know what I think is interesting about that footage? I made this point too with Austin as I played some of the lunar rover footage. Look, I firmly believe they didn't actually go to the moon, but I have to say they did a pretty darn good job with this set. If that's not actually the moon, that is one of the biggest warehouse spaces imaginable. I'm not exactly how they pulled that off. And yes, we do have whistleblower testimony from Bart Sibrel, deathbed confession of a security guard at the Arizona military base, evidently, where at least the first mission took place. What do you say about that, Jeran? You have to give them credit for one of the most vast theatrical presentations I've ever seen.
Well, I think this is done pretty much with miniatures, really.
Yeah.
And I'd be able to show a video that I found recently where the guy's kind of showing that this is sitting on like a platform, a moving platform, and that this is all that you see behind you is on a screen. So I'm sorry, all that you see in front of you. So the entire landscape is not real. This is just a screen. And then they have this fake mini mobile that I'll have to show. Let me find that video. I have it for you, but I'll show you what somebody shows as far as it's sitting on a moving platform. And then there's a roundabout screen, like a basic, almost like an IMAX screen, but one that kind of curves towards you. And again, these guys are flying, the thing's flying off of hills, but their voices don't change at all. And it's as if they were sitting in a studio reading lines while this thing looks like look at this rocks that it's going through. Again, it's just kind of bouncing around. It's not really shaking much, but I'll show you that video.
The other thing that's so difficult to swallow with this entire story is that, the danger of being in the vacuum of space, obviously the temperature on the moon, sunlight versus shadow, they're just going to tool around in a dune buggy like they have no care in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It just makes zero sense. And you can show us that I know what you're talking about, by the way. I have seen.
Oh, you've seen that?
At least photos. No, but I want you to show the audience if you can find it. But let me just say, there seems to be a cottage industry, and some might say, in exposing this NASA moon hoax. I would say there's a cottage industry in trying to support the official story. There's certain people out there who have dedicated their lives to it. And others like Joe Rogan have kind of turned tail and now changed their story after signing a $100 million contract with Spotify. What is your take on those who have dedicated their lives to trying to prop up the official story of the Apollo missions? Jeran and then Grosen has some evidence of that, I think.
I guess it's because people don't want to feel like they're fooled. And then again, it is the greatest technology, the greatest achievement of mankind, right? If you were to say it was real. So if we did go to the moon some 50, 60 years ago, but ways that we can tell that this is just a story is the fact that like Elon Musk, right, is right now launching rockets, and then they go up about 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever it is, and it comes back and lands. And people go crazy and think he's the genius of the world. But 50 years ago, we put people in there. We put people in the craft. It didn't launch 10 miles into the air, but 250,000 miles into the air, and then dropped men onto a foreign body. They got out, they played around, they played golf, they drove a moon buggy around. Then they got back in the same craft and launched from what landed became the launcher. And they launched from that craft, reconnected with the command module, came back and dumped into the ocean. So what we did is 50 years ago or 60 years ago is infinitely more impressive than what Elon Musk is doing today. Yet we're told this story of he's great and look at these reusable rockets. Well, we did take a rocket to the moon and land there, and then the people took off in the same one. I haven't seen that yet. Have you seen a Blue Shepard or a Dragon? Has it taken off with people inside of it, landed on Earth, and then taken off again with the same people inside of it? It's like we're not even close to that yet. So the kind of the deception kind of exposes itself to me. But as far as the people who spend their time, I mean, I'm not surprised people spend their time trying to promote the mainstream all the time.
And think about the supercomputers that Elon Musk and all his people that they've got access to at SpaceX that didn't have any computer power back in the 1960s when they were developing the Apollo program.
Right.
Yeah, plus they've destroyed all the telemetry data. They've destroyed all the blueprints. They've destroyed the entire program, and they say it would be a painful process to build it back again.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable the crap they sell the American people and people around the world, and some people still buy it. And meanwhile, you have Jeff Bezos' phallic rocket. Every single time that thing goes up, whether or not Will Shatner's in it or somebody else, they never show anything outside the window, do they? They never show us anything. They just land these people, and then the people say, oh, my God, it was such a moving experience.
Yeah, we've asked for interviews with these guys or interviews with astronauts. I actually know somebody who has an in at NASA, and I said, look, you know me, I'm respectable and respectful. I said, can you get me an interview with one of these astronauts on the ISS? I said, because if I had a 15-minute live interview with an ISS astronaut, I think that I would be able to show that it's not real, right? For instance, if they're on wires, then you could just say, get one of these other astronauts to put their hand above you, below you, on the side of you, show us that there's no wires. And because there's other ways that they could do it. We've seen video of like David Copperfield, how he goes about these little tricks. And then they've never gone to the window at night and showed us the stars, which should be brilliant out there. We don't even know. Do you know, Sean, if stars can be seen in space? Because we find are mistakes by these astronauts, starting with Neil Armstrong, who said that the only thing in space that's visible in cislunar space, which would be between the Earth and the sun, is the Earth and the sun. That's the only thing visible. So they couldn't see stars on their trip. But then you've got other astronauts saying you can see stars. You've got Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, oh, even because there's no atmosphere, you would see brilliant stars all the time. Then you've got that Leroy Chow who says you can't see stars whether you're on the daytime or nighttime side of Earth. So they can't even get that story straight, which is embarrassing.
Marcus Allen, he told a story about a pilot who flew the SR-71, this spy plane that could fly so high and so fast that the Soviet Union could not shoot it down with their missile or rocket technology back at the time. That this pilot, he chose while he was up there in, 78,000 feet or something like that, that he switched off the artificial light in his cabin. And he looked up and he could see so many stars, and they were so brightful that they could illuminate all his instruments. I don't think there is that great a difference between what he could see from that plane and what amazing views they must have had from all other kinds of spacecraft that are in low Earth orbit.
Let me ask Jeran a question. So this lunar rover cruising around here on what we're told is the moon. People say that you can see that now. They left it behind. Is there any truth in that at all? Has anybody ever been able to zoom in with a high-powered telescope and show us this thing still sitting there?
No, besides the LRO, which is the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter that they say is orbiting the moon, that it has some pictures that basically have like a little pixel change right at the bottom. You'll see like a little white blotch, and then they'll have arrows pointing to it, and they'll say this was the rover, this is the lander. But nothing beyond that, nothing that you could say is true. And you certainly can't zoom in with any telescope and see that far. Even talking about something like the rover that's bigger than the flag, there's no telescope powerful enough to do that.
Well, as we're watching this footage here, the point I did make to Austin is that maybe these are miniatures, but if not, it's one heck of an impressive warehouse space where they shot that. But you know what? If money's no object, and I don't think it was, if they didn't spend, how much money did they say they spent on the rockets and the Apollo missions?
Oh, in all of Apollo?
Yeah, I guess what I'm just driving at is whatever that number was in 1970 dollars, money was no expense. Money was no object. So if you hire Stanley Kubrick to help you figure this thing out, even if he wasn't responsible for all of the footage, he helped them do something that I think is pretty convincing in hindsight, because here we are more than 50 years later, still trying to reverse engineer exactly what the hoax was and exactly how they pulled it off. And we're getting closer and closer every single day. Even with these deathbed confessions from security guards at military bases, that helps us understand the totality of the picture. But still, my hat's off to Kubrick or whoever the heck pulled that footage off, because if you go back 50 years and you're sitting in front of a little black and white TV and you're a 28-year-old young father,
yeah,
you're going to buy it hook, line, and sinker, just like the American people did.
So between 1960 and 73, it was 25 billion, which today would be 257 billion. With inflation.
That is nothing compared to the annual budget you just talked about of 450.
Well, that's
billion.
not. Yeah, that's the industry. So NASA's budget is whatever it is. I don't. It's right now. It's $80 million a day. So, and it's not. I'm not talking about Monday through Friday. I'm not talking about take weekends off or take holidays off. That's every day. So, I mean, to think if I gave Sean $80 billion one time and said, Sean, here's $80 billion. I want you to better America. I want you to better the world. Think of what I would demand, of what I would expect out of that 80 billion. And then to think, 80 million. And then to think NASA gets that every day. And what do we get? I mean, I'm baffled as to what we're getting. What are the benefits? If you look up NASA benefits, it's like memory foam, handheld drills. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, but all those things would have been invented anyway. It's not as if NASA wasn't around, we wouldn't be using handheld drills today, or we wouldn't have memory foam, right? It would have been eventually discovered or researched and then here's another thing that people don't realize, and this is a shame. So did you know that we're all paying our money to NASA? NASA hires engineers, and engineers go in and they invent things. When they invent things, they go and get a patent for it. Now, you would think that would be open source or something. No, what NASA does with these patents then is sells them to the highest bidder. So then you've got a company out there in the world that purchases this invention, then they can charge a huge amount of money for it, and then we pay that huge. So our money is what is used to invent things that we end up having to pay more money for, because a company then has exclusive property rights to that invention. Just insanity. It was like, what are you talking? If it's our money, if it's government money, if it's our taxes, then we should be the owners. We're the owners of that technology, not whatever company pays the highest price.
Let me go back to this film footage I was just playing here of these guys at Mission Control. You know, every time we have these conversations, inevitably I'll get an email from somebody who says, yeah, but my dad, yeah, but my uncle, yeah, but my great-grandfather, he was there, he worked on this. Let's talk about the compartmentalization, the need-to-know basis. Let's talk about what was really happening here, because I think it's a lot like SpaceX. Today, when we see those young people cheering every time there's a launch or every time they land one of these things, we're told, out in the middle of the ocean, they cheer as though they're in some sort of theater production, which to me just doesn't add up. These aren't professionals doing something. Like, you would never see surgeons behave this way after a successful heart transplant. What's going on here in this footage in terms of compartmentalization? And because people will say, well, then everybody was in on the lie. I don't think so.
No, very few. Rather, I mean, I think you could have very few people in on it. There's a quote by Gene Kranz, who was the mission director around Apollo time. I'm not sure which exact missions.
By the way, featured in that Apollo movie, directed by Ron Howard, Gene Kranz is the guy who plays the hero, who says, not on my watch.
With all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
That Gene Kranz, yes, he's still around today.
His quote is that he says that no controller or no controller operator, anybody at mission control, would know the difference between simulation and real data coming in.
Yeah.
So that's all you need to know, is that if they were not going to tell everybody sitting at the consoles that it's not real what's going on. They're going to make them think that what they're doing is actually looking at real data. And that's very easy for them to send in simulation data, and people are monitoring that. I mean, think about it. Nobody's sitting at a computer desk has the, they're not going to be able to press a button and the craft crash. They're just looking at numbers, and they're probably supposed to alert people if there's some anomaly or something. That's all that they're doing. So if it's just fake data coming in, they just acted like it was real. They thought it was real.
If they're able to, during the Second World War, to make the landing in Normandy on D-Day a secret to the German high command, to the German army. And if you can also, what's the second one, the big one, where you also have it hidden sort of in plain sight until it really happens. But yeah, that's the Manhattan Project. That nobody knew about that one, despite hundreds of thousands of people were employed in that project, and that's compartment. What do you call that in English? I can't say
Compartmentalized.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When nobody knows what the neighbor is doing, and this is the same in a big company. Those on the floor don't know what's going on in the other departments, and they certainly don't know what's going on at the board of directors.
Yeah. The other thing is that Gene Kranz has been asked about the telemetry data, and he says, yes, it does appear that all of the telemetry data has been lost. And even if we found it, we don't have the machines to play it back. All right. So they've destroyed everything. And as far as simulations go, need to know basis, military compartmentalization, think 9/11. Think 9/11, guys. There were exercises going on, and some of the people involved in those exercises when 9/11 happened and the first plane hit the first building, the second plane hit the second building, they said, is this real world or exercise? Oh, this is real world. So the exercise went real world. My point is that, yeah, they could have an exercise happening and the people involved don't know they're part of an exercise.
It's the same as the bombing in London a few years later. That was also an exercise that suddenly went real.
That's right.
Where I think it was some buses that were blown up.
That's right.
Or was it underground trains? I can't remember.
It was the London Underground, and Peter Powers, who was running this exercise, came on, I believe it was the BBC, and said, the hairs on my arms are still standing up. Why do you say that? Well, we were running an exercise of the exact same situation that happened at the exact same time. And then suddenly we had to react and go real world, because the exercise they were running actually then became a real world act of terror. That you're right. It was a false flag act of terror. The London 7/7 bombings. That's right.
Same thing with San Bernardino. The San Bernardino there was an exercise going on right next door or something.
Yep. 100% right. Yep. I covered
Let me show you this
right.
Real quick. Just I wanted to point out that one of the ways you can tell that all this footage is not real is because you can watch these mountains and they never get closer. They're never revealed. They're just there in the background. But like you would think, this thing's driving towards it, you're going to reveal more of this little mountain back here, but you never do. It's just a solid piece that just kind of moves around, but it doesn't reveal more. So anyway, this is that video I was telling you about that kind of shows if they were on some sort of a moving platform like this, and then they show that there's a screen, and I'll show you here in a second, that is kind of a wrapped screen. And we've seen things like that from NASA, right? We've seen that the track that has the moon next to it. I can show those pictures in a second. So here you go. Here's this screen that you would then have this little miniature, and you would have this kind of camera showing it. Now, what would be evidence of that is if you just have the guys not making sounds like they're really on a real go-kart driving through the moon, which is what I can point out easily, that they never make any sound. Like if you bounce up and down, you can hear that you're bouncing up and down, whereas these guys weren't making any sounds like that. So it's just kind of showing how that might have worked. And then it shows how these miniatures have been used for years to show that you see this person's huge inside that, right? So it could be, we're looking at, it looks like a huge set, but it could have been done with miniatures. And in fact, there's lots of images of these guys they were in like the miniature shop. I'll show you a couple images here real quick. So they've got like this. Well, this is the one I will tell you about on the track. So this is the picture of, let me move it over there. Okay. So this is a picture of, they had this big ball. Now this is like a track for some reason next to this curved screen. And again, it doesn't even make any sense that you would think, oh, that's because they're, and then they've got these guys painting it in painstaking detail, right? They're painting exact replica. And here's the track coming around here. Mm-hmm. So you could basically put a cart with a camera on it and emulate the orbit of these crafts on the moon. Why else would you do that? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. They have these real painted, like photorealistic paintings of, here's this guy sitting here for hours painting this ball exactly like the moon. And so let me see what else. Here's the miniature shop. Oh wait, let's see, is that the miniature shop? No, they're just looking at photos. I have some miniature stuff here. And they do, all these things that they do, it just doesn't really jive to me that this is what you would do if it were real. Why would you need to have that track with and here's kind of some pictures that I have of these crafts with these black backgrounds that are on these, what are they called? Simulators. We've got these things hanging. And if you've ever watched like the craft as it's moving in space, doesn't it look very mechanical? move left, move right. It's like a little robot, which is what you would get from these hanging rafters if you have the craft hanging here and you blacked out all the background scenery. And let's see here where we've got, here's the machine shop where they're doing, if you can't really see, I got other pictures, but these guys are making miniatures of everything, all the little craft, the little modules. Here's like a, they call it a projection sphere with the models. You got the track here. Again, to me, these things don't really jive with, here's another one.
They did, though, didn't they, in order to make some more realistic footage to the crew of astronauts through sort of projection through windows and screens, etc., right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
But I bet they abused them to do the fakery from Apollo 11 and forward.
I was just going to say, this image here is not, I'm not saying this is NASA because I've said that, somebody said before, that's not NASA. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you watch the astronauts, they do look like they're on some sort of a balloon or some sort of a harness system. That's why they can't bend over and pick up tools and things like that, even though that should be easier. And in fact, if you really think about it, if it's 1/6 gravity, like they tell us, meaning that, let's say you're a 200-pound man and you're wearing a 150-pound backpack. So you're 350 pounds on Earth. Well, that means that you weigh about what? 60 pounds, 70 pounds on the moon, but you have no gravity and you've got the body mass, the muscle mass of an adult male. So you would be able to jump over the lunar rover. You wouldn't, there would be nothing stopping you. You have the muscle mass of a man here on Earth, but you've got nothing restricting you. Right now, we've got the atmosphere on top of us. What is it? Whatever, 14 pounds per square inch weighing us down. We've got our own weight weighing us down. You got everything keeping you on the ground. If you're on the moon, you'd weigh 60 pounds and have none of that atmosphere on top of you. You'd be able to leap over the lunar rover. We don't see anything like that. We see him jump 3 feet in the sky.
Well, one thing that's also funny is that if you see them jump and you have this feeling that they are hanging in the wire, and while they're hanging in the wire, the moon dust falls down. And once that settles down, then the astronaut comes down afterwards. It's funny how the dust on the moon falls faster to the ground than the astronaut himself does. I guess that's because he's on Earth and hooked up on a wire.
Well, let's back up, though. I want to show you guys something. Let's just talk about where we were in space and time in the late 60s. So the world's greatest filmmaker, Stanley Kubrick, was working on a film called 2001: A Space Odyssey. Some of the pictures of which, if you guys haven't seen the film, you need to go see the film, okay? It looks as good today as it did then. It looks better than most of the stuff coming out of Hollywood today because Stanley Kubrick was a genius. So there's some images of that film here. And I need to correct myself because when Austin was on, I kept referring to rear screen projection. It's actually front screen projection that Stanley Kubrick pioneered and was an expert in and used in 2001: A Space Odyssey. So in this image, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Here he is on that orbiting space station with astronauts in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Back then in the day, Stanley Kubrick was the pioneer. So the question should be asked, why was he so chummy with NASA? Why are there images of him walking around with officials from NASA back in the day? These are questions that must be asked. And then why we should run the actuarial tables regarding the possibility that Stanley Kubrick would then drop references into him potentially faking or working with NASA on the Apollo missions. Why would he drop those references into The Shining? Like, what is the mathematical likelihood that there would be any references to Apollo and those moon missions in The Shining? Those are questions that are fair to ask. And the people that stand opposed to this and stand with officialdom, they don't want those questions asked. No. They don't want to talk about it.
Do you know about Eyes Wide Shut and its release date?
Yeah. Yes, it was on the anniversary, right? Yeah.
Right. And and that was demanded of him in his contract that it was released on that, whatever it is, July something 1999, right? So it'd be 30 years to the date.
Yes.
And so he demanded that, and then he died before that movie came out. So I'm not saying they killed him or anything, but and then if you look at that 2001: A Space Odyssey, it was all or mostly done in miniatures. I'll show you. I've got a video here. So let me transfer over there again. Browser share. Nope, not that one. Keep missing the wrong one here. Here we go. So this is a video that's shown before where this is all miniatures. I mean, we've seen this scene of the movie and you think it's a real room, that looks like the movie's room. But if you look, there's a hand. Right. This is all very tiny little stuff. And it makes it, this is something that he was not one of the first to do, but he, was an expert at it. And you can kind of go through this and see all that they're doing is with miniatures. And it's crazy to me that this is people can't think for themselves that, one thing is we've been lied to about everything, right? I mean, you name it, they're lying to us about everything, things we can go and touch and test and verify ourselves, vaccines, you name it. So then there's people who say, yeah, they're lying to us about that, but they're telling us the truth about space. And to me, it's like, no, that would be the first thing they would lie about, is the places you can't go, because nobody who's watching this or listening to this show is ever going to space, ever. You're not going to live on a planet. You're not going to go tour the solar system. Yet all this money that goes into it and all this love behind it, and it's just because people want to have these dreams about space. They want to, they were indoctrinated with Star Wars or Star Trek, and I think it's a hard thing for people to admit that they've been fooled.
I didn't have any idea that the technology that Kubrick was using, this looks like much more modern video than, what is this? Who are these people talking about the miniatures? This is impressive footage. I've never seen this before.
This is the replica set as a 1/6 scale, came from a suggestion of a model maker. I
just didn't realize they had that level of visual effects back in 1970 or 68 or whenever the heck 2001 came out.
They did the same thing for The Shining, right? So the Shining scene where you've got the blood coming into the hallway of the hotel, that's all miniature. That's just a very small, you know what scene I'm talking about?
Yes. Oh, of course I do. Yeah, it's an amazing movie. And, evidently Stephen King hated it because it departed so much from what he wrote. And evidently that was Kubrick.
Right. And the thing that it changed for a reason, right? So the room number changes. The book doesn't tell about room 238, but 238 is, of course, the distance to the moon.
So, and by the way, so evidently, I haven't read the original that Stephen King wrote, but I've seen The Shining several times. And in the movie, the little VW bug is yellow, but in Stephen King's book, it's red. And there's a scene in The Shining where the innkeeper drives by on a snowy, I don't even know how Kubrick shot this stuff. It's really amazing. During this terrible snowstorm, there's a semi that has crashed, and crushed below it is the red bug, the red VW. So that's Kubrick telling King, this is my story. That was yours. This is mine. Take the ride with me. And I thought that was interesting. For people who haven't seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, we can talk over this. I just want to play the trailer because I think it's one of the best movies ever made. Certainly if you think what he was able to accomplish with that technology, well, it kind of brings us full circle. No wonder NASA asked him or demanded that he work with them. If people haven't seen this, they got to go see it. See it, and if it ever plays in an IMAX near you guys, go see it. It's truly unbelievable. You've seen this film, right, Jeran?
Yeah.
I still have got to see this one.
Oh, you haven't seen it? Well,
no, not yet.
I didn't think it was that great, but that's just me.
Well, I mean, it might be a little slow, but it's brilliant in the scope of what it shows you. If the goal is to remove you from your disbelief, right? If the goal is to get the movie goer into a different world and to believe they're seeing something in a different world, a different space and time, this movie's brilliant. I mean, I think the spacesuits are better than the Apollo spacesuits. And frankly, you guys got to remember as you're watching this was prior to Apple computers and, Apple touchscreen technology, and nobody knew what the future would look like. So you got to give the guy credit for what he's come up with here. It's unbelievable.
Isn't it in the Space Odyssey where you see the scene where the apes are sitting in front of this front screen projection, right?
Yes.
Or is that another movie of his?
No, that's right. That's the way this movie starts.
I heard that the reason why the committee didn't give him a prize for that scene regarding best costumes was because the people who were on the committee thought that they were real apes filmed in nature. They didn't know that it was actually human beings inside costumes.
Yeah, I've heard the same.
That was how a perfectionist he was. That's kind of a good way to not earn a prize, and then you actually get a higher prize by not getting it, because the committee thinks that, oh, you've filmed apes in real nature.
Yeah, here's what you're talking about. So the front screen technology, the entire background of that opening sequence is, well, the part that makes it look as though it's filmed on Earth and the landscape goes on, forever, as far as the eye line can see, is because of the front screen technology. So there's evidence of front screen technology that has been sussed out in the moon missions, right, Jeran?
Yeah, you can definitely. There's a couple guys. I think Scott's one of them, Henderson, and some other people who have done presentations on that. I was just reading about this Douglas Trumbull. I know he died in the past, but he was talking about the same thing, that he was the one that was done the spaceship miniatures and the visual effects, and they say that they've never been matched in their prodigious quality, even now, when computer graphics can deliver pretty much anything imaginable. He's the one who did multiple techniques called slit scan, smoke lit miniatures, show scan, etc., creating visual aesthetics still widely emulated today. And he started, well, his first movie was called To the Moon and Beyond, 1964. And then from that, he got picked up by Kubrick for 2001. So they definitely, and again, he's developing these miniatures that have, they are incredible. I mean, they're detailed as it gets. I'm looking at this one here, the 50-foot, 15-meter filming miniature of the spaceship USS Discovery, as seen in 2001. The level of detail in this miniature, I'm looking at it now, I can't believe it's a miniature. Like, that is incredible. It just seems like it'd be impossible to build that.
Can you show us?
Yeah, oh sure. Let me show you here. So just talking about like this here. Now, again, I've seen the movie once, but you've seen it probably. But I mean, this is just a miniature. It says it's 15 feet, 50 feet. So we don't mean miniature as in like handheld, but yeah, it's just talking about that and the way he did different. You remember the scene where that flies through the rings of Saturn, like this scene here?
Yeah.
Talking about this, using the decommissioned U.S. naval vessel Valley Forge to shoot the interiors of the fictional spaceship Valley Forge. He was able to give his film tremendous production value on a somewhat limited budget. So just incredible what these guys were able to do, taking nothing away from them. But I do think that they're lying to you about, outer space. And as far as where we can go, what we can do, I think it's all make believe at this point. And they can prove me wrong easily, right? I mean, you go to one of these places. When we go to the moon and we have people there, one of the things that I was laughing at recently is that, did you hear about this Dear Moon mission?
No.
Oh, so there's this, they came out with this Dear Moon. If you go to dearmoon. I think it's just dearmoon.com. Dear Moon, actually might be .io or something. Let me see. Dearmoon.earth. So this crew came out, and it's this Japanese rich guy, and he picked these 10 different people or whatever. And they actually came out and said that they're going to, let me see if it still says it on the website. It does. Still shows 2023 as the date that they will lift off. And I went on my channel and I said, I'll make anybody a bet right now, $1,000 that there's no way this thing I said, how could you even say that we're going to launch this craft and it's going to take these guys around the moon in a SpaceX craft? And again, it says right here, planned for liftoff in 2023. Well, this is what space gets away with that nobody else can. They blatantly lie to you. And the thing is, because people aren't so in love with it, even if you bring it up to people, they're like, well, yeah, they're probably not going to go in 2023. It'll probably be 2024, 2025. It's like, I get that. So why are you allowing them to just lie and tell you that it's going to lift off in 2023? We know that's not going to happen. In fact, this guy here, Tim Dodd, where is he? Oops, go back one page. Tim Dodd is a YouTuber, and he did a video shortly after saying he thinks it'll be around 2028. So again, they're just flat out lying to people. They basically had a bunch of people, like 1 million people, send applications, and then he picked, this guy's a YouTuber. You might know this guy, Steve Aoki's like a DJ in the United States.
Yeah.
There's a couple artists, couple filmmakers, and these guys are all supposed to go around the moon in 2023. And if you look up Dear Moon 2023, all these journalists all say the same thing. And it's like, stop, Dear Moon, not Dear Moon. They all say the same thing. It's like, if these were real journalists, somebody would step up and say like, oh, scheduled to launch 2023. But why are they announcing it like it's real? They're going to go to the moon as soon as 2023. 2023 is set to be a busy year. All these journalists all just ride on the back of this. They all pretend like, and everybody knows, just look up Space Hotel 2020, Space Hotel 2015. I mean, all the constant news that comes out that says that there'll be a hotel in 2020. Now it's 2025. See, and they'll just kick this down the road. There's not going to be a hotel in space in 2025. It's a joke. It's an absolute travesty that people fall for this. And they just don't realize it in their entire life. They'll realize, oh, space was just talked about. The can was kicked down the road, and then you eventually die. That's what happens. Yeah. So, that's what's going to happen to us. If you think that you're going to get to see one of these things actually come to fruition, that's not the point of it. The point is that the ISS is going to have a space hotel. Here's another thing you can do on Google that's fun to do. Type something like space hotel, and then you can actually change your search date, right? So I can do space hotel, tools, change from anytime, go to custom range, and then just put in these dates. But I'm going to put instead 2000 to 2007, let's say. Okay, so now it's only going to show me results from 2000 to 2007. But you can go through here and say, new space tourism, and every one of these will be, here's a hotel tycoon building an inflatable space station. It'll be finished in 2015. You can just find this nonstop. It's always the same thing. They just are lying to people. Here's it is. This commercial space station to launch in 2015, the space hotel. It's just insane to me that people don't realize what's going on here, that they keep pushing it down the road. If you go Branson, I mean, you've seen what's happened to him, right? Think of how late he is on, what is that stuff called? His, what is this company called?
Virgin,
yeah.
Virgin Galactic.
Branson, maybe Space Hotel. He'd say the same thing. And again, you just keep those same dates. And I often show this on my channel that you can find Virgin Galactic, Anatomy of a Business Model. Now on board, Spaceship One paves the way for passengers. It'll always say that he's going to it's going to be coming up in 2008, 2009, and it just never happens. Here's Space Hotel set to open in 2012. Okay. I mean, again, it's just a joke. And you go to these articles and there's just nothing ever happening. It's just not going to happen. But they continue. It's bad enough that it happened in the past. It continues to happen. You'll hear about these. Haven't you heard of like these up and coming companies that are going to take people to space? They're going to go. They always just come and go.
Yeah, space tourism.
Do you know Moon Express? The Moon Express is a company that I think that they won the not the Google Lunar X Prize, which again nobody actually won that. They put out this big deal that they're going to give $30 million away for I don't know if you've ever heard of that Lunar X Prize. Never came before. Never gave the money away. But the Moon Express, the guy who's the CEO of it is a known scammer. I'm trying to think of his name right now. Is it Moon Express CEO? Let me make sure I'm getting the name right. And they've got like the worst YouTube channel, but they're supposedly going to put, no, not that guy. What is the name of the company? Let me think of that for 1 second. I'm forgetting the name. It's Moon.
Oh, what's also funny about this Google Prize, do you remember that there were somebody who participated who said, we are going to land a small rover very close to where some of the Apollo missions landed. And then we're going to film, for instance, the part that didn't take off from the moon or a rover or whatever. And NASA came out and said, you can't do that because that's worth keeping. It's so historical, so it's supposed to be kept like a as if you
ground.
were exactly. So you couldn't do that, and they were sort of forced to go out and make an official statement saying, we're going to land somewhere completely different.
It's like the Antarctic. You can't go there. It's off limits. Hey, that I think let me just ask you, Jeran, about the spiritual nature of this conversation, because it really needs to be a part of this conversation. I had friends on that I really respect a lot and admire, and they're really smart folks. And I kind of broached this area of the conversation, the nature of this thing we live on. And, they bumped on it because not everybody is on board with this concept that there is a firmament. And maybe what NASA says about this entire thing we live on is not true. What are your thoughts on that and what Werner von Braun left on his tombstone, Psalm 19:1? The heavens declareth the glory of God, the firmament showeth his handiwork. And by the way, as we're having this conversation, Jeran, do you or I will call up some of these photos of SpaceX launches, of NASA launches, and I want to talk about the trajectory and the arc of these rockets. To me, they don't appear to be going into space. They appear to be falling into the Bermuda Triangle.
Right, that's what I think too. And if you look up the timing of the Bermuda Triangle, it's funny. It's around the 50s, 60s, right when it started to be noticed. So, remind me your question again.
Just the nature of the spiritual component to this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely they're hiding something, right? And I'm not as religious as others in this movement, and I think that some people gravitate to me for that reason. I do think that they are hiding the Creator. I think that everything on earth is hiding the Creator. I think that it's all confusion. It's meant to be. I think that long ago they realized that we all had a connection with the Creator, that we all desire to find Him, and we all have that in our hearts to begin with. And so I think that they co-opted that by making sure, and I know this because I went to a Jesuit high school, and I never understood why when I got there, they started, they teach you religious studies, and then your next class is biology or evolution. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, I learned my whole life growing up as a Catholic that we don't believe in evolution, but now I'm at a school that's a Jesuit school that I'm being forced to. So I was very disillusioned with school, and I kind of dismissed it because of that. But now I realize that these guys, like these Jesuits, they want you in a belief system. If you're in a belief system, then you are easy to predict. They know exactly how you'll react. For instance, if you're somebody who believes fully in science, then I don't need to ask you the question of what you feel about the vaccines, because you believe what the mainstream narrative is: safe, effective, and the greatest invention that saved these millions of lives and all these things. So once you become a known quantity to them, they can maneuver things and they can set up these traps, and people fall for them. So what I try to do is stay in the middle, right? I try and make sure that I can address any evidence as it's brought to me, and I'm not married to one thing or another thing to where I say, no, that absolutely is against my belief system. I'd rather be open. So I think that there are people who clearly see that the Bible is a book that tells a different story about the earth than what we're told today, right? Clearly, they talk about a firmament. They talk about, a flat, non-rotating or non-moving earth, right? They say it's can't be moved. It'll never be moved. So I get it. It's definitely the way we're starting to see the world matches a lot better with the Bible than it does what we're told about science. Because, I mean, imagine these guys, these scientists, these great men of renown. What they actually are telling you is that they can create, with just glass, shaving some glass right and putting it in a tube, they can see back in time. So really, it's like this fantastical wizardry that we just all fall for. I'm like, yeah, okay. They actually tell you that they can see these stars and they know about these planets that are going around them that are 25 trillion miles away at the minimum. 25 trillion. I mean, people don't realize that, a trillion seconds is 31,000 years. And that just gives you an idea of what a trillion really is. Right. A trillion seconds is 31,000 years. So tell us that we can see stars 25 trillion miles away. It's ludicrous to me. And then they tell you that this light's coming from back in time, and that how do they know these things? How have they verified these things? They've never gone out there with a measuring tape and measured. They just are claiming it.
Yeah, you have a clip to play, don't you, of one of these characters claiming that the nature of the earth, the conceptual human belief of the nature of the earth has always been the globe model? That's not true. That's 100% verifiably false, in fact.
Right. Let's listen to him say this here, because you tell me if this is a true statement here.
No basis at all for thinking the world is flat. Nobody in human history, as far as I know, has thought the world was flat.
That's verifiably false.
Well, yeah, all of the Babylonians, the Egyptians, I mean, you name it, they are the Hebrews, they all thought that the earth was flat. So to just say something is...
The Greeks measured the radius of the earth. It is I cannot conceive of a reason why anybody would think that the world is flat.
And he just gets so upset about it. And
they're interested in it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just crazy that he goes on and on about it. But no, yeah, to just flat out lie like that is crazy. Or these guys, they keep bringing up this Aristophanes sticks and shadows, right? But anybody can see what that is at your own home. Take two items. Let's say you got two beer bottles, and put a small light source on top of one of them. Well, the one that you're on top of has no shadow. The one that's next to you has a shadow. Is the table that you're doing that on curved? No. So what they use as evidence is like, what? Like, what are you talking? Now, if you assume that the sun is 93 million miles away, and you assume, which by the way, they tell you, and we just eat it up like nothing, that it's 867,000 miles wide. We can't even fathom that. You can't even, if a plane is flying into the west coast of the United States or something from Hawaii, and you're looking at the coastline of California, that is what, 600 miles long? So to think of something that's 867,000 miles wide is insane. And go out and look at the sun today, and you tell me if that's a believable story. But again, they tell you all this fantastical things, and then you try and find out, well, when did they get the measurement of the distance of the moon or the earth? I'm sorry, or the sun? And the story is even more fantastical, right? That they saw the transit of Venus. And so they did some mathematics. Now remember, this is in like 1600, 1700. So they sent some people to different places on the earth. They used pendulum clocks. So a pendulum that's swinging. That's how they calculated these times. And then they had to assume that Venus was the same size as Earth. And guess what? When they got it all done and they went up there and checked it out, how lucky were they that Venus is the same size as Earth? Amazing. Amazing that they just estimated that off nothing. They have no reason to believe that. You could say the thing about Jupiter. What if we predicted that Jupiter was the same size? And then, now it's 100 times bigger.
Well, let me say something in regards to what that clip. Who was that guy who was just speaking? I recognize him. What is? I'm sorry.
Brian Cox.
Brian Cox. Okay. Well, look. So I happen to know, and I'm not an expert in this field, but I am a Globe, as we're told, skeptic at this point. Let's just talk about long distance laser experiments. But what I wanted to say regarding what Cox just stated, I happen to know that it was Copernicus who, I think in the mid-15th century, was tasked by the Vatican to come up with this heliocentric model. He did so, and only reluctantly years later allowed his paper in part to be published because he was embarrassed by it. So we have the geocentric model, which suggests the Earth is the center of the universe, therefore pointing directly to a creator. And then we have this heliocentric model. And so Brian Cox omits that. He says, nobody in the history of the world has ever believed the world is flat. And by the way, the ancient cultures that did believe that, these weren't stupid people. I mean, I don't know if we could replicate the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza today. I don't think we can. Not to mention the free energy technology that appears to have existed maybe right through the 1800s, and of course was all sealed up and put in a closet along with Tesla technology, thanks to the Rockefellers and the Morgans and the Rothschilds. So laser experiments. In my interview with Austin, I cited, as I like to do, the Suez Canal. So if you look at the Suez Canal from a satellite shot, you can see much further than the 120-mile long canal. But if you just take the 120-mile canal, there should be more than a mile of Earth curve buried in that. So what the point I like to make is that for people who are skeptical about this conversation, just think about the nature of the basketball that we're told we live on. There would be a perpetual curve. It would never end. It would go mile after mile after mile, and we would all experience being on some sort of curve. When we're going on a vacation, we're driving, it doesn't exist in our human observable experience. So
I have observed something which I would say is supporting that we live on some kind of sphere, and that is that I've been on some of the Danish islands and I looked out into the ocean, and Denmark is putting a lot of windmills out in the ocean because they are not nice to look at and they make a lot of noise. So why not put them out at the sea where there's a ton of wind in addition? And I could stand up there and I could look out in the sea and I could just see the top of the windmill. And the wings would go up through the air, and then it would seem like they went through the ocean and then came back up. That sort of supports that they were so far out that the curve of our globe would start at that point. However, I'm definitely not against the idea that we are being lied to about how far out we have to go before that curve actually occurs.
Sure. You know what? In defense of what you just said, that's why I coined for myself the first time that I had David Weiss and Crow on, globe as we're told skeptic. I don't know. I don't have any proof that we're not living on a 24,900 mile sphere, but I think they're tied to their math, and therein lies the problem for them. And I would say, go back to that beach you were on and bring a Nikon P900 and zoom in on those windmills. Grosen, you might be surprised what you find.
And I could show video
definitely. I did not do that, so that could be fun to do.
Yeah,
and there's video that will show you that from a distance you can get the bottom of things to disappear. There's somebody who is called Sky Free on YouTube, who does these little experiments where he basically tells you the temperature of the room, tells you the temperature of the floor, has little items set up off in the distance. Then he'll open the door and let different air in there, which kind of jumbles it up. Well, everything from the bottom disappears up. And you could get the floor kind of rises a little bit, which is the same as the water kind of rising a little bit. And it shows that those windmills are actually on the water. They're not clearly. Think about what we're being said is that there's windmills so far that they're so far down behind the curve that their blades are still spinning, and it looks like it's going through the water, right? But the actual stuff is coming up. But I just wanted to show you about the Suez Canal. I just read a book the other day called His Pronouncement, which is from 1920 or something. But there's a whole bunch of quotes in here talking about the Suez Canal and the canals of public works. Talking about in 1892, the engineer's office at the Manchester Ship Canal reported that it is not the practice in laying out public works to make allowance for the curvature of Earth. Somebody else in October 1893, a surveyor and engineer of many years' experience over his signature reported allowance for the curvature of the Earth that nothing of the sort is ever allowed. January 1896 from T. Westwood, his signature signed over his name saying not the least allowance was made for the curvature of the Earth. Although if the Earth were a globe, we should have 112 feet should have been allowed. So it goes on talking about here, this is about the Panama Canal. So I could send you this book if you want, Sean, send it off if somebody has any questions about that.
Yeah, thanks. And do you have any comment, though, on this infrared photography being done by Jay Tolan, which is revealing
crazy
a globe far larger than 24,900 miles if you're to believe it's a globe at all?
He does great work, and he's just using basic, because infrared will fight through the muck, right? So you always get people, and just so people know, I don't consider myself, I wouldn't say necessarily I'm a flat earther. I like using true earther better, because again, when people hear flat, we've all been conditioned to shun that, to think it's the most ridiculous belief you can ever believe. And then there's still other people who think we're talking about a 2D piece of paper. So I like true earth because it allows me to say, hey, I'm just looking into things. I'm just investigating. If I get to the bottom of it and we are on a spinning ball flying through space, then so be it. But I have so many problems with that. Number one, figuring out who came up with these things like redshift, who came up with the idea that things are moving away from us. And, you go back to Edwin Hubble and you read him say, we got to stay away from the absolute horror of a unique position. So these are not unbiased scientists. These are men who have a worldview that says that we cannot be the center, we cannot be created, we cannot be important. And so they developed all of science around that. Now we're getting reports that dark matter might be wrong, right? That we may not actually be expanding. So all these things that are coming out now, people have thought, and they'll even go to bat for them, right? There's people who will tell you right now, they'll go to fight you if you say we're not expanding or we're not flying through space at these crazy speeds. Again, if people want to just buy into what people are giving them, I mean, there's somebody telling you that we're traveling right now 1.2 million miles per hour, right? 66,000 miles per hour around the sun. And to think that we wouldn't notice that, again, it's not a constant speed. People think it's a constant speed. It's accelerating speed. It does change speed. We're going at different speed at December than we are at June. So again, these things are just, if you want to believe them, by all means, you're welcome to believe them. I think that they are meant to distract you from the truth. And let me give and then I got to go here pretty quick, but let me give two different tests that people can do for themselves. Well, number one that will change your life is to do the rice test, or I just did it recently with distilled water. But your voice changes your intentions, what you say to these rice. What you basically do is take cooked rice and put it into 3 brand new mason jars, and then and close it. Make sure there's an equal amount in each jar. Close them. You'll never open them again. Write on one of them love, write on the other one hate, and then write on one of them neutral. Set your alarm for sometime that you're home every day, whether it's 9 p.m. or 9 a.m., whatever. And then go to these jars and spend about 30 seconds on the love one, telling it that you love it. You have to really do it. If you're not going to do it, then don't expect results. You can't just go, I love you. Go there and tell, oh, you're so beautiful. You look great. You're amazing looking. Then do the hate one and tell it off. Tell it you're disgusting. I hate you. And then just leave the neutral one alone. Put them all in the same cupboard. After about 2 weeks, you will be shocked at how the one that you've loved still looks edible. Looks the same as you put it in there. The one that you've been hating is now growing mold. It's disgusting. It's filthy. And the neutral one is somewhere in the middle. That when you do that for yourself, you'll realize that this is why they put out all this negative news on the news. This is why it's constant racism, or it's constant black versus white, left versus right. We hate Trump. We hate Biden. It's meant to bring discord, because as long as we're fighting, we're actually doing damage to the world. I think it's by design. Yeah. The other test, if you really want to do something that will prove to you the shape of the earth is not what we were told, I suggest doing a mirror test. And what you need for this is very simple. It's no expense really. You need a camera, you need a mirror, and I don't mean like a bathroom mirror, not like an 8x8 or not an 8-inch circle, but if you can get something that's maybe 1 foot by 1 foot or even 2 feet by 2 feet, and then you just need that, and then you need a body of water where the sun is setting. And so we've done it before at the Monterey Bay, and I can show that real quick actually. But let me just show that.
Do that.
So that is the free flat reality. Okay. Earth Explorers. So they did the distance of, I believe it was 18 miles. And you can even go further than that if you get up a little bit higher. But the reason you have to get up a little bit higher is because you are looking through the atmosphere, but you can still get at a point where.
Are you showing something? Can't see it.
Oh, sorry. Didn't see that. Let me think real quick here. 1 second. Videos. And let me find this one. Here it is.
I enjoy this conversation because you don't have to be a flat earther or a globe, as we're told, skeptic or anything. You can be a globe believer if you want to, but you can still question NASA and all their lies. So this was the 1 hour NASA comedy lies and disappointments hour. And we have gone over more than an hour here, Jeran. I know you got to go, but show us this last image.
So this is what they did across the Monterey Bay. So this is just showing if you've ever been here. Basically, you've got from where Pacific Grove is across the water to like Lover's Point. That's basically Lover's Point, and then you shoot towards, what's the name of that? I forgot the name, but this is they have these huge towers that are enormous. But the reason that this is great is because when you get out there, it's very difficult to locate somebody 18 miles away or whatever, or 14 miles away. So what you do is if you have something behind them that you can actually do a good job of lining it up. So what they did is they went out here and used this mirror. And again, when you look at the hump height, there's supposed to be a hump in between, and I don't think this is the right video. Hold on. that's when I'm practicing. So you're supposed to be a hump between you and a distance, and whatever that hump is usually huge when you get out to be 15 miles plus. Let me see which one it is. This one? Yeah, maybe this one. So when they go out there and they do this experiment and you shoot across, I'm trying to find where the actual view is. You can actually see the flash, the mirror flash. Well, that's Salton Sea. That's the wrong place.
And that mirror flash is far further out than the math says it should be possible to see.
Well, this is something different. So that's drop, right? You can do a test where you're checking if something is hidden by the curve. But what this is doing, oh, here we go. Thank you. Oh, this is actually my video too, where I talked about it, where I'm kind of showing, here's the problem with using a laser, is that because a lot of people use lasers, I get it. But what happens is if somebody shoots a laser over, let's say it's a hump like this is what the Glober's excuse is for this, is that if you're shooting a laser, maybe the person here is only seeing the part of the laser that comes over, and they're calling that the origin. So I get that argument. But what happens when you're talking about the mirror flash is if you go out and you actually do a mirror flash, go out in your front yard today with it. This one, you can use a bathroom mirror. Use a bathroom mirror, have somebody stand a distance away from you and flash the sun at you. And they've used this for years for communication in the army and things like that, right? It's called a heliograph. And you basically flash the mirror at somebody. The second that mirror is occulted by anything, so have that person slowly crouch behind a car or a garbage can or whatever, as soon as that mirror is covered, you lose all sight of the mirror flash. Why? Because it's a line of sight observation. So what happens is when you actually get out here and you do it, did I press play? Yes. You will actually see the mirror flashing. Now, again, it can't be that you're seeing it. It's not like a laser. You know, if a laser shoots, you could see how, if we saw a laser appear right here, I could see somebody saying, oh, that laser is actually coming up over the hill. Yes, but if it's a mirror flash, it cannot be that, right? So Sydney here is showing, oh, come on, this thing's working here. So Sydney is actually down at the ground. I mean, she's, what are you talking here? 3 feet above the water, barely. And you're able to see her flashing this mirror. You see, here's Wendell. Oops, come on. And here's the camera from the other side. The camera on the other side is but barely 3 feet off the ground.
Look at that whale jump. That's amazing.
Yeah. So for 3 feet off the ground to where she is here, and look at her with the mirror, she's very close to the ground. So we're actually able to see from this distance the mirror flashing. And again, this is not shooting a beam. It's not like a laser. A laser is a coherent light source, right? Going a distance. But when you're just flashing a mirror, and you can look this up, if you just look up heliograph, it'll say that the great thing about it and the reason the Army used it is you have to have line of sight. You can't be somewhere else and catch a glimpse of it or anything like that. You have to see the actual mirror. And they've done it like 190 or further miles, but they're way up in the mountains in Colorado or something.
And you're saying this is like 14 miles? How many feet 13. Of curve should be hidden here?
Well, if you look at the hump height, which you can go to the Metabunk curve calculator, there's something called the bulge or the sagitta, right? Which is if you draw a straight line between the two people, there's a certain amount of water that bulges up. So between 13.23 miles is a 30-foot bulge. Well, people don't realize how big 30 feet is. It's a 3-story house. So the chances that this person here has a mirror, this person here has a camera, the sun is setting behind this person, so the mirror is then flashing the sunlight. How is this person seeing this mirror? It's behind 30 feet. And again, you're not going to believe me until you go out, and I don't expect you to, and I don't want you to. Go out and do it for yourself. Start out, first thing you should do, go out with a friend, with a mirror, flash the mirror at him, the sun at him, and have the person with the mirror occult it somehow, get behind a garbage can or car. When you notice that, oh, he's right. Soon as that's occulted by anything, you lose all connection with the mirror. You don't see any flash. It's not like you see a glint appearing above the car or above the trash can. It's gone. It's gone completely. So once you see that, you're going to go, okay, this is a pretty good device to use, because if we go out here and this person's able to see the mirror flash, it should be occulted by a huge 30-foot mound of water. And it's not. And so that's one where I don't think enough people, I just want to real quick before I say, where's exactly the real one? I want to show you the actual flash so you can see what I'm talking about. This is my review of it. Maybe it's this one. Mirror observation. Maybe it's this one. See if this is the one that shows. Okay, this is better. So this is the one.
There it is.
Right. So that's actually line of sight. Now remember, there's a 30-foot wall of water. So how is it that
there should be a 30-foot wall of water? Right. Well, let me just show something here too, if I can. I want to just show before we part ways. I know we're going to lose you. So this Jay Tolan infrared photography is impressive because when he's up in airplanes, he's shooting images of the Earth far, far greater distances than we ought to be able to see on their fixed 24,900 mile globe math. And one of the images he shot that stuck with me because I live in the Midwest is one where he was flying over Chicago, shooting up. Within the photograph is the entire Great Lake of Lake Michigan and the Bay of Green Bay and beyond that. Now, that is not possible to see without revealing the curve if the 24,900 mile math stands up to scrutiny, if that's real. So I'm just saying that we've been lied to about everything. And I think it's, at this point, okay to be a globe, as we're told, skeptic, because their math just doesn't stand up to scrutiny, Jeran. Where's the curve?
Yeah. Okay. It's just that you must be able to calculate then if he's that high up in an aeroplane, then of course he can see further than if he was not. However, there's still a limit because an airplane cannot go as far up as a spacecraft in low Earth orbit, for instance. So there must be some kind of limit. So if he can make a photograph even further out than the math allows, that's once again something that's problematic for the official version of how this.
Now I'll tell you how they get
that
around
we are
it.
living on is put together. Sorry.
Look at those mountain ranges. I wish he'd put I wish he'd put the miles on here. He has in some cases, like the one I just mentioned. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds
He's
and hundreds
claiming
of
to
miles.
see 1,000 miles. Now, again, I don't know if that's necessarily the truth, but I do know that that's because you have to. I mean, again, with infrared, you can actually peer through some of the atmosphere that we can't do with a telescope or anything like that. But yeah, he's showing there's curve calculators. You can just type in Earth curve calculator. You'll get a calculator that asks you to put in your eye height. So if you're on a plane 35,000 feet, you put that in, then you put the distance that you're trying to see. And if you put 200 miles, it's going to tell you, no, you can see all that. You put 300 miles, it's going to say, yeah, you can see all that. But if you're at 35,000 feet, I think the number's probably around about 400 miles or so. That would be the most you could see. And then he's showing mountain ranges that are 500, 600, 700
Yeah.
miles.
Okay.
Now, the thing about it is that their excuse is always refraction, right? So
do you know if you can actually, you're not allowed to take a plane and go over Antarctica and do you fly south and then you pass Antarctica and you start flying up to the North Pole and then you get back to where you started. That's not allowed as far as I'm concerned. You cannot go by boat. You cannot go to Antarctica. You cannot fly there. You'll be stopped somehow by military planes from different countries, as far as I'm informed. However, I assume that some people have taken aeroplanes and flown from some place going all the way east all the time, or the west all the time, and then landed the same place without sort of having to turn around and go back.
Yeah, well, if you've ever seen a flat Earth map, look right there in the lower right-hand corner where it says, "Is Earth actually flat?" That planes can go they can go east or west easily and circumnavigate. So it's just north-south that would be a problem on a flat Earth. And that seems to be where the problem is on the real Earth, that we don't go look it up. How many people have circumnavigated north-south? You're going to get, Sir Ranulph Fiennes, who's like a third baronet of some country. He's the cousin of the Queen. When he went to the North Pole and celebrated there, Prince Charles went and saw him. So he's got all these, higher ups, but he's like, they call him the world's greatest explorer. But I've got paperwork from a court case that he was in where he had to admit to faking expeditions and faking accidents because some girl that was with him got injured during a fake accident. She actually really got injured. She actually lost the court case because they said, no, you agreed to fake the accident, so you're not going to sue him now for faking the accident. But he had to admit that, yes, they faked some of these accidents and expeditions. So it's just weird that it's this guy faking expeditions. I watched in 2015, December. The guy's name was ZQ Pilot. You can still look him up. Just search ZQ Pilot. He was going for the record for quickest north-south circumnavigation. And he had something on his plane called a spider tracks where you could actually go to this website and watch everything he was doing. So I said, this would be great. I want to see if we can get somebody doing north-south circumnavigation. So he flew from North Carolina down to Brazil and then stopped in Brazil. And then his next trek was supposed to be over the South Pole to go to New Zealand. So he flies from Brazil. He leaves. He gets to about the 90-degree mark, turns around and flies back to Brazil. So he got back to Brazil and everybody's asking what happened. He said, oh, the weather was treacherous. I didn't want to keep going that way. So he went to Brazil. Then from Brazil, he flew across the Pacific to New Zealand, then up to Alaska, then up to the North Pole and back to North Carolina. And they gave him the record. And I said, all right, time out. That was the biggest thing to me. I said, now we're giving people circumnavigation records who didn't circumnavigate. Running to the South Pole, touching it and coming back is not circumnavigation. Circumnavigation would be crossing the North Pole. So, like basically, like if you ever played basketball, you used to run liners in gym where you have to run and touch the far line and come back. That's all he did was run and touch as far as we can And then he came back to Brazil, then flew across the ocean, which again works on a flat earth. The only thing that doesn't is flying across. There's a girl, I can't remember her name now. She skied to the South Pole and then turned around and went back to where she came from. So I wrote her, she had a blog, and I wrote her an email and said, hey, how come you didn't just go across? To me, if I was going to ski to the South Pole, why wouldn't I just continue skiing so I could say I crossed it, not ski there and come back? And she said, oh, I tried that, but they told me it would be $70,000 more to pick me up on the other side. So I'm like, I mean, there's all these little evidences that tell me that the South is bigger than we thought.
Well,
there's no cruise ships that go from New Zealand or Australia to South America. If they do, they go up along Japan, along Alaska, down the west coast of the United States. Why don't they go across the bottom? There's no undersea cables that go from Australia or New Zealand to South America, which again, that could be they have all the sea cables go up and along the coasts. Well, it could be because if they did tell somebody to go out there and they measured the distance on a globe and said it's 6,000 miles, and they went out there with 6,000 miles worth of cable, I think they would end up 3,000 or 4,000 miles short. So again, and people are like, oh, well, nobody wants to cruise out in the ocean like that. Like my dad goes on cruises all the time. And he doesn't even get off the boat. He just likes to gamble and drink and eat. So he would be happy going on that trip. It's not impossible. But Sean, let me just
like most Americans. Look, I know you got to go, Jeran. I want to do one more thing, just real topical here before we part ways, and then plug this event on March 17th, the True Earth Equinox Summit. Before you do that, though, last night my wife and I saw a movie. It's Guy Ritchie's latest. I think Guy Ritchie's a fantastic director, one of the top 10 in the world, in my opinion. He was smart enough. Actually, he was dumb enough to marry Madonna, but smart enough to divorce her. And what I'll say about Guy Ritchie is this latest movie called Operation Fortune is worth seeing. It's enjoyable. It's a popcorn movie, right? But here's the thing. In the movie, you got Jason Statham, you got Aubrey Plaza. People might know her from that White Lotus, very popular on HBO. And Hugh Grant, who plays a billionaire, a super brilliant billionaire, and he does a great job in this movie. And in the movie, Hugh Grant's character, the billionaire, has a crush on Aubrey Plaza. He likes to own things. He'd like to own her. And at one point, while trying to woo her, he says, let me show you the world. It's far, far bigger than you can imagine. And I thought that was interesting because only a well-heeled billionaire might have the keys to the castle and know the truth. People like Bezos, people like Elon Musk, you can name the names. All right. That's my topical aside of the day. Jeran, March 17th, what's happening?
Yes. And if people have a question about circumnavigation and things like that, and they are interested in the True Earth or Flat Earth, they should check out Dave Weiss's app, which is the Flat Earth, Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app. I think it's easiest for me to explain it to people. None of us, we're not out teaching schools. We're not out going after children. I believe in free speech. I believe in free thought. And I think that anybody trying to shut down any conversation is doing a detriment to the world. So again, if you don't agree with me, that's fine. I don't expect you to. But again, give it an open thought if you're interested in that. I just think it's important everybody knows that there's people who do think alternative methods are maybe correct, and you should at least give it a thought. So the event that we have on the 17th, 18th, and by the way, his app is called the Flat Earth, Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app. It's in the App Store and the Google Play. But that gives you a nice map that you're able to see how the stars work, how the sun and moon orbit, and then there's a bunch of buttons for FAQs. If you have, what about circumnavigation? What about, you name it, whatever it is. Why don't we see forever? Why can we only see a certain distance? All those things are answered there. So yeah, we're 8 days away here from this event. We've got some great speakers. Amanda Vollmer will be there, Marty Leeds, Dave Murphy, if you guys know about him, David Avocado Wolf, Bro Sanchez, Sean Hibbler from Hibbler Productions, Dustin Nemos, Crow 777, and Jason will be there, Iru and Zach from Globebusters. We've got Brian Young, who's High Impact Flicks. We've got the Mellow Dome and Caleb, and we've got some entertainment from Chris Crum and Sam Tripoli is going to be doing comedy on Saturday night. And then myself and Austin Whitsitt are the hosts. And here's your schedule, and you can just go to TEMMS.live if you're interested in that event. We've kind of done it in a unique way that we want to support these speakers who may not be making money otherwise. So the tickets are only $50 and we give 20 of that to the speaker. And so they do a pretty good job. They do Sean is somebody who promotes it for us. So Sean is a name on the list. If you go to buy a ticket, there's a drop-down menu. So if you wanted the ticket here, general admission, once you purchase that for $50 and you do credit card, you'll see there's a drop-down menu right here that's mandatory. And you have to select one of the speakers, and you'll see down here is SGT. So if you just select SGT there, put in your name, put in your credit card and all that stuff, then you can attend the event. It's a 2-day event, packed full. It's the Friday and Saturday, 17th and 18th. And it's not something you don't have to watch it live. You would get access to it forever. So it'll be video on demand whenever you want.
That was one of my questions, if it was something you had to be in person, or if it's something that was streamed live, or if it's something that you can watch afterwards, or a
right,
combination.
You can watch it forever. The only thing that you would want to be live for is if you purchase the VIP. So the VIP, because VIPs get to ask questions of the panel on Friday night and also get to ask questions on Saturday. So the VIP, you would want to be there live, or else you'd miss the asking questions, and then you kind of didn't really need to be a VIP.
Let me just say one thing. Lots of freebies too. So just real briefly, you can mention that. But I got to say, Marty Leeds, one of my favorite people. Have had him on many times, and I've got his book. Lord Jesus Christ is his book, sitting right here in front of me on my desk. So that would be one not to miss, in my view, guys. If you want to attend this, listen to what Marty Leeds has to say. He's one of my favorites. He helped wake me up to this. He's done some videos. We need to talk about Elon Musk, the deocculting of SpaceX. We need to talk about flat Earth. He's done remarkable work, in my view, Jeran.
Yeah, he's amazing. All these guys are, and we handpick them because it's people that are either questioning the model, right? So they're just not setting their feet in and saying, no, it absolutely can't be. They're open to these ideas. And then it's great. If you're somebody out there who's on the fence, come to the event and give it a chance. Give it a 2-day chance. You're getting to kind of hear from a lot of these big names in the movement. And if you decide at the end of it, no, all these guys are just liars and full of S, well, then that's what you decide. But I think that you'll come out with a different understanding that really we are all in this for the right reasons. We all think we've been lied to about everything. And some of these guys have some great presentations to give you that may make you change your method of thinking or your line of thinking. And I think there's nothing better than that. The mind of a truth seeker would always be open to evidence of something that they may not believe or that they're strongly against. And if you have a strong feeling against something, usually that's a sign that you might want to look into it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're 100%, 1,000% right, because where are we seeing evidence of the powers that be wanting to hide the lie and maintain the lie right now? The Jan 6th footage that Tucker Carlson has released. You got Chuck Schumer and rhinos all demanding that Rupert Murdoch silence him and censor him and say it's a national security issue to let the truth be known about what really happened on January 6th. I see some parallels between that kind of behavior and the behavior of the people that want to make fun of this topic. All we're doing is having discussions. I don't know. I think that's very pro-American in my view.
Yeah. And again,
and one thing I also think is important is that you might be questioning the assassination of John F. Kennedy. You might be questioning 9/11. You might be questioning, for instance, this release of a virus in China. Was it from a wet market? Was it released from a biolab? You might put a question to what kind of stuff is inside the things that were put in the needles that people took the past 3 years. You might question all these things. And you might also question, did man ever put their feet on the moon? If you just question some of them, you have an open mind regarding that what the officialdom tells you is not correct. So you might be sort of very fixed on some topics and more open-minded to something else. I'm definitely going to buy a ticket for this and awesome. Watch them afterwards. And then because I want to keep an open mind and see, well, I'm a believer in that we live in a globe and that we can travel around it in low Earth orbit. I just don't believe that we can go beyond the Van Allen belts because it's the vacuum and the radiation is simply too dangerous. But the stuff that you're telling me about how you can go across what the globe should be able to allow you to, and you can still see further from that, I keep an open mind about that. And I encourage everybody else to have the same kind of openness towards topics that you might think, oh, can that be true, what they are saying, especially if you're questioning other stuff already told by the officialdom.
Yeah, well said. Grosen, 100% well said. And by the way, I think that your Lego model looks a lot better than the thing that they say they took to the moon. Maybe Lego should have been hired to build the lunar lander.
I would get in that lander, but I would not get in the.
Actually, the funny thing is, inside this one, there are 2 pilots or 2 astronauts, and they can barely be in there. They cannot move around. So Lego has actually been very, very accurate about this model. So, yeah.
That's funny. John, I appreciate it a lot. I got another show.
I know you're late for your show. Jeran, thank you so much. Jeranism.
I put a link in the chat there for the trailer if you want to play that. All right.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right.
Nice meeting you, by the way. Be great to see you at the event. Thanks. Peace.
God bless. Bye-bye. Bye. All right, Grosen, thank you so much. Appreciate you as well.
Thank you. And it was very fun to being on. And I'm honored to be on your show. I've been following you and your work for, I can't remember, something between 5 and 10 years, I think.
Thank you so much. And like I said at the beginning of the show, you've done some very nice things for me behind the scenes. Let's just say it's related to email since I got kicked off of MailChimp. So we're trying to get our email list back up and running. It's been a painful process. You know, in the words of NASA, we destroyed that technology, or should I say MailChimp destroyed that technology, and it's been a painful process to build it back again.
Yeah, exactly.
Grosen's helping me with that. All right, brother. Thank you so much.
No problem. You're welcome. And it was a pleasure being on. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine. And friends, thank you so much for tuning in and keeping an open mind. Look, you don't have to be a flat earther to question these things. You can be a globe as we're told skeptic because they've lied to us about absolutely everything else. What have they told the truth about? The bioweapon masquerading as a vaccine? No. The 7/7 bombings? No. 9/11, World Trade Center 7, and the BBC reporting early about the collapse of that building? No. How about the wars they got us into in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya,
Vietnam, Gulf of Tonkin.
Thank you very much, Grosen. Vietnam. And how about World War I, World War II? How about the Civil War? There's always motives behind the official story, and those motives are never revealed to the public. And it does beg the question, have they lied to us about literally everything? Friends, thanks so much for tuning in. I'll leave a link below to the True Earth Equinox Summit on March 17th. And for real news every single day, you guys can visit us directly at sgtreport.com. We try real hard to provide the real news, the antidote to corporate propaganda and Mockingbird mainstream media lies. May God bless you and yours. Bye-bye.
We choose truth over facts.
Oh my God, they've got a madman on their hands.
All men and women created by you know the thing.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to